Hello and welcome. My name is Barrett from the C4 Cyber Club here at Cypress College. This video is kind of like an introduction to subnetting. I'm essentially going to cover a few different subnetting worksheets that are assigned for the CIS 230 Cisco Networking 1 class. So the main objective is to go over those worksheets, but for the very first one, the one I have on the screen here is for Worksheet A. I thought I could go into extra detail about subnetting, about the methods that we use to complete this sheet. So yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. So essentially, we'll also be looking at decimal to binary conversions. We'll be talking about how IP addresses are broken up into 4 octets, which those I should just get into now. So the number of public IP addresses is limited. The concept of subnetting is introduced to create subnetworks given an assigned network. And an IP address is essentially a set of 32 bits. So you can see here, each of these fields represent a bit, and it's broken up into 4 octets. So we have 8 bits per octet. So that is where we're getting these 32 bits. And these are used to define a specific host or a client computer in a specific network. The 32 bits, which defines an IP address, also consists of network bits and host bits. And we'll get into a little bit more details on that in a bit. So first thing we want to talk about is converting this dotted decimal to binary, because we essentially, remember, binary is a base 2 numbering system. So we're looking at either a 0 or a 1. So we can do this manually, or this worksheet does have some very handy calculators. So let's say if we knew the decimal is 192, this will automatically give you the binary. But let's talk about it manually first, because it's definitely good to know. So because we're working with a base 2 numbering system, you'll see up top here that we have the powers of 2 increasing from right to left. So essentially what this is doing, we have 2 to the power of 0, which any number to the power of 0 is always going to be 1. And we have 2 to the power of 1, which equals 2. 2 to the power of 2 is 4. 2 to the power of 3 is 8, and so on. And then we get up to 128 here. So we can actually do this manually by saying, okay, we have 150. So we're just going to focus on this first octet. So 150 minus 128. Let me pull up. We could use a calculator. So this would be, or, if you were maybe in an exam and no calculators allowed, you can either do it in your head, or you could usually use a sheet of paper. But here we could say 150 minus 128. Oops. So we have a remainder of 22. So because we were able to go into that, we could say, okay, that we turn this on. We add a 1 here. So 22, that will not work with either 64 or 32. So these are zeros. Whoops. Tab is your friend when filling this out. Now we get to 16 and we could say, okay, 22 minus 16. We turn this on. We have a remainder of 6. That's not going to 8, so that's a 0. 6 minus 4. So we could turn that on. We have a remainder of 2. So we turn 2 on. We have a remainder of 0. So this is going to be 0. And we could even double check our work over here. Type in 150, 100101110. And that's the same over there. So that's how you manually convert decimal to binary. Since this second octet is also 150, we can go ahead and I like to just shift, choose all of those, press Control C, press Control V over here. That'll help you fill this out much quicker. So 0, 0 here, that means all of the 8 bits for each octet it's going to be 0. So I'm going to go ahead and Control C, Control V to paste. Okay, so we have the first row complete. We have the network ID converted to binary. Okay, so next, let me bring this chart over. And this is going to help us determine the default subnet mask. So we could tell this, we need to determine whether this is a Class A, Class B, or Class C IP address. So we could see, because it's 150, this is in the Class B range. So the main columns here, I know there's a lot of information here. We don't need to get into all this yet. We're basically looking at this first octet, and then we're looking at this default subnet mask here. And this is something that you'll just become comfortable with. You'll eventually memorize which class an IP address is. So because this is a Class B, we know that the default subnet mask is 255.255.0.0. And so that's going to help us determine the next portions of this. I'm all good with that. Okay, and now let's go ahead and add in the binary. So you'll also come to learn that all 8 bits of a octet turned on is 255. So let's add all of those in. I'm going to copy and paste. And then these are zeros down here. So I'm actually just going to copy from up here and then bring those down there. Great. All right. So now we need to figure out the subnet mask. So the challenge of this worksheet is we're given a number of subnets that we want. And so we need to determine what is the subnet mask. And then that's going to help us figure out what are the first and last subnet IDs and the usable addresses from the first and last. So what we need to do here is, oh, and you know what, I kind of forgot to mention as you work on these, this worksheet does have some very handy steps. I know it's a little bit small and hard to read, but if you ever get lost while you're doing this, it's really nice to refer to this. And there are some nice tips over here, some formulas. Over here, we actually have a chart which shows the powers of 2. And we'll actually utilize this in just a moment. So if you look at this section here, we see X is maximum number of subnets that can be created with Y bits. Y is the number of borrowed bits. And then we have 2 to the power of Y equals X. So this is the most important part here. So we know X is 64. So essentially we need to figure out 2 to the power of Y, and that's going to tell us how many bits we need to borrow. And so remember that this is the network portion, and then the rest of this here is going to be the host bits. These are I should maybe do it here. These are the network bits. These are the host bits. But to determine the subnet mask down here, we need to borrow some bits from here, or however many we need. So we can consult the powers of 2 to determine, okay, we need 64 subnets. Well, 2 to the power of 6 is 64. So Y here in this case is 6. So that means we need to borrow 6 bits. And actually, because we know that this is the network portion, and these are all turned on, I'm going to fill those in. So we can go ahead and add those 6 borrowed bits. And now it's super important when especially when you're learning, highlight all of this portion, because this is going to be essentially your subnet portion. And we could just highlight that. And now for the remainder of the subnet mask, this is going to be all zeros. Okay. And now now that we have all the binary, we could fill in. So this we know that if they were all turned on, they'd be 255. And we could say, okay, it's missing 1 plus 2, that's 3. So 255 minus 3 is 252. There is also a nice handy chart over here of some of those common numbers that you find in subnetting. So you can say 252 and match the binary there. And then, of course, the fourth octet, that's going to be 0. Okay, so good start. Next, what I usually like to do is fill out the subnetting portion of the first and last subnets. And you could follow along with the tips in this first note here. So for the first subnet, these subnet portions are going to be all zeros. So we can go ahead and fill those in. I'm going to copy and paste. And then you could see here for the last subnet, they're going to be all ones. Okay, so we got those in. And it's definitely important when you're first learning this to take this a step at a time, learn the method. Because once you learn this and you get this down, there's, essentially no scenario that you won't be able to figure out. Okay, so now that we have those, we do need to figure out all the host bits here. But first, I think what I normally like to do is I like to fill out this left side, because we actually have a lot of knowns here. You're going to come to just always remember that these first and second octets, because of the default subnet mask, these are essentially static octets at this point. And we could say these are all going to be the same the whole way down. But I do want to explain why. So there is a process called ANDing, ANDING. And that's basically the process of performing multiplication to 2 binary numbers. So in the decimal numbering system, ANDing is addition. 2 and 3 equals 5, for example. But with the binary numbering system, the AND function yields only 2 possible outcomes, because remember, binary is base 2. There's only zeros and ones. And so this is based on 4 different combinations. And I probably saw it earlier when I had it on that other document. So this is called an ANDing truth table. And it's very easy to remember, very simple. 0 and 0 is 0. 0 and 1 equals 0. 1 and 0 equals 0. And essentially only 1 and 1 equals 1. So how that can apply to these binary numbers, let me go ahead and highlight this just so you know what we're focusing on. Yeah, I'll pick green. So this is what we can use to determine the subnet ID. So this first bit here, 1 and 1, that equals 1. 0 and 1 is 0. 0 and 1 is 0. 1 and 1 is 1. 0 and 1 is 0. 1 and 1 is 1. 1 and 1 is 1. 0 and 1 is 0. So you can see it's exactly the same. And like I said, it's something you will just become comfortable with, and you'll just know, and you'll say, okay, yes, these are static. I can just go ahead and add those in. But I just wanted to quickly describe the concept behind it, which is ANDing. Okay, so that said, we can just go ahead and copy and paste this all the way down and make this a little less scary and less empty. Okay. So now we just have to determine the host bits over here. And if you take a look here at number 2, you'll see the handy tip here. First usable addresses, which is in this section, rows 7 through 10. We use all zeros and a 1. And actually, you know what I forgot? First with the subnet IDs, this is going to be all zeros. That's going to be the same for down here at the last subnet ID as well. Okay, so back to the first usable address. So this is going to be all zeros followed by a 1, which makes sense because, you know, the first usable address, it needs to be the first bit turned on. There are 2 addresses saved for the first subnet ID and the subnet broadcast. And that's something that we'll talk about in a moment when we're figuring out how many hosts per subnet. We'll come back to that in a sec. Now also you'll see the last subnet is all 1s. Or I'm sorry, the last usable address is all 1s followed by 0. Oops. There we go. And then here, the last subnet is all 1s, the subnet broadcast. Okay, so now if we add these up, this is all zeros, all zeros. Let's go ahead and add those in there. This one is all zeros. Here we have just a 1. And now on this one, all the bits are turned on except for the very last one. So that's going to be 254. Then here we have mostly zeros, but the 1 and the 2 are turned on. So that's going to be 3. Same here in the third octet as well. And now on this final one, we have all turned on. So that's going to be 255. All right, so we have all of that done for the first subnet ID. And we just had to do the same for the last subnet ID. So we know this one. We have mostly all 1s turned on except for 2 and 1. So that's 3. So that's going to be 252. And then the fourth octet is all zeros. And then remember for the first usable address, this is all zeros, followed by a 1. The last usable address is all 1s, followed by 0. And the subnet broadcast is all 1s. All right, and let's just go ahead and complete the decimal. This is also going to be 252. This is only 1. Here, these are all turned on, so that's 255. On the fourth octet, everything turned on except for the very last one, so that's 254. Here we see that both octets are fully turned on, so those are both 255. All right. Now, the very last thing that we need to do is figure out the number of hosts per subnet. So just as a refresher, we are looking at network bits, the subnet bits or subnet portion, and then the remainder bits over here, these are the host bits. So first thing you want to do is count. We can see a full octet of host bits here, so that's 8, 9, 10. So we have 10 host bits. And essentially, the formula we want to follow is 2 to the power of the host bits. In this case, it's 10. Minus 2. And this minus 2 is because, remember, I said we need to save space for the subnet ID and the subnet broadcast. And that equals, we could check the power of 2 chart over here. So 2 to the power of 10 is 1024, minus 2 is 1022. So we could say that we can have 1022 hosts per subnet. And that's it. That is the worksheet, the assignment. Going over these, you'll learn through repetition, learning this method, and the more you do it, the easier it will become. Okay, so that was worksheet A. Let's go ahead and do worksheet B. I'm going to move a little quicker now that we went through all of the intro and the basics and describing in a little bit more detail. So if you still feel you need help with that, I would recommend rewinding the video, going through that little extra process. But so this is, once again, this is worksheet B. So first thing we want to do, let's just go ahead and build this out in binary. And on this one, I'm going to go ahead and use this calculator over here. So all you do is just enter that in. We have the number. Remember, tab is your friend when filling these out. It'll move you over to the next field. Okay, and all the rest of these are zeros. That's easy. Okay. Now, I will pull this chart over again. Remember, to figure out the default subnet mask, we need to determine what kind of class IP address this is. This falls in class A, so it has a default subnet mask of 255.0.0.0. Okay, I'm going to turn all of these on for 255, and all the rest of these are 0. Now, we need 1024 subnets. So I'm going to consult the power of 2s. So we need to borrow 10 bits. And the subnetting is going to begin right here in the second octet. So we can actually go ahead and add this as 255. So we know that's the network portion. That's not going to change. So now we need to borrow 10 bits. So we know an octet is 8, 9, 10. So we need to borrow all the way up to here and turn all of these fields on, all these bits on with 1. Okay. And remember to always highlight this area. This will be our subnetting portion. And for the rest of the subnet mask, we will have zeros. Okay, so we can go ahead and fill this in. Those are all turned on. 255. These first two, you take a look over here at this chart. The first 2 bits turned on, that's going to be 192. And then the fourth octet is 0. All right, the next step, we know the first subnet, these are all going to be 0 within the subnet range. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste. The last subnet ID, these are all going to be 1. Go ahead and copy and paste. Now remember, we know that this first octet is going to be static. So we can pull this 11 down. Go ahead and add this in. We know the binary for that from the first octet. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste that. Hopefully you all get comfortable with the copy and paste. It'll definitely speed up the process of filling these in. And we do have some more information we could fill out, but I'm going to go ahead and finish the host bit portion here. So remember, the first subnet ID and the last subnet ID, we add all zeros. I'll go ahead and do it down here as well. For the first usable address, this is all zeros followed by 1. And remember, you could reference this down here. And this section here, remember, this is where you can remember to get the information on how to do the zeros and ones in this subnet portion as well. Yeah, so for first usable address, all zeros followed by a 1 at the very end. Last usable is all ones followed by a 0. And the subnet broadcast is all ones. Okay, first usable, same down here, all zeros followed by 1. Last usable address, all ones followed by 0. Subnet broadcast, all ones. Okay, so let's get the second octet. These are all going to be 0. And then the second octet down here, we can see these are all turned on. Now the third octet, these are all 0. These ones here, we're missing a couple in the beginning. Let's go ahead and, now you could also use a binary to decimal over here. Okay, so 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. That's 63. And that was right here on the third octet. The next one down is the exact same. Oops, why is that popping up? Sorry about that. Now we're on the fourth octet, all zeros. This one here, we have just a 1. This one here, all turned on except for the last one, so that's going to be 254. And then the final one is all ones, so that's 255. All right, we're in the last subnet ID. The first 2 turned on here, that's going to be 192. Remember, you could always refer to it over here as well. It's definitely just one of those numbers you'll start to remember as you work on these. And then the rest of the third octet, these are all turned on, so 255. Here we have all zeros. Number 1. This one here, all turned on except for the last one, so that's 254. And then the final one's all turned on, so 255. Okay. And so yeah, just a reminder on that one, it was a bit harder. Remember, you could use the binary to decimal over here. Basically just enter in the combination of binary and it will automatically give you the decimal. Another tip actually is using the calculator. You can switch to programmer and you could actually enter in as decimal. You can enter in as binary. This also comes in handy for hexadecimal conversion as well. So I could have technically, for the 63, I could have entered in 111,111. Whoops, sorry, I'm on decimal. Don't do what I did. Switch to binary right here. 111,111. So you see, you don't have to enter in the zeros yourself. It'll complete that here, and you can see that that is 63 in decimal. So that is another way to do it. And of course, it can be convenient to go decimal to binary. So if you wanted to find the binary for 11, type in 11, and it's 1011. But technically what that means is it's 00001011. All right. Okay, so all we need to do now, figure out number of hosts per subnet. Remember that we need to look at how many host bits that we have left after the subnetting. So we have 8, an octet is 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So that's going to be 2 to the power of 14 minus 2. So that is 16,384 minus 2. So it's 16,382. So quite a lot of hosts on this one. Make that a little bit smaller so you can see it. Yep. Great. So this is Worksheet B, all done. We've knocked out Worksheet A and B. Now let me go ahead and load up Worksheet C. All right. Last one. Okay. Let's move even quicker. Okay, so we need a number, we need 16 subnets. Let's get the binary going here for the decimal numbers. So 196 is 110000100. 10 is going to be, we could do this manually. We could say 000. 10 minus 8 is 2. So the 4 would be a 0. 2 minus 2 is 0. So that would be 0. All right, the next octet is the same. So I'm going to copy and paste. Fourth octet is all zeros. This is a Class C address. Remember the chart? So the default subnet mask is 255.255.255.0. So these will all be turned on. These are all zeros. Remember, 2 to the power of y equals x, or in this case, 16. So we can consult the table of the powers of 2. So that's going to be 4. We need to borrow 4 bits. And remember, the subnetting is going to be happening here. So in the 4th octet. So turn on the first 4 bits here. This is going to be our subnetting portion. So we know that these are going to be all the same. Here we have to add zeros. So now if we add up the 4 bits here followed by zeros, we can consult this chart. We can see that this is going to be 240. And I'm going to go ahead and add all of these ones here. And then remember, we know that this is going to be static. So we can actually pull these numbers down here. And we know the binary for it already. So we can fill in a lot of these fields. All right. And then remember, for the first subnet portion, these are going to be all zeros. Copy and paste. In the last subnet portion, it's going to be all ones. So now all we need to do is complete the host bits. So for the first subnet bit, this is all zeros. First usable address is all zeros followed by, all zeros followed by 1. Last usable, all ones followed by 0. And the subnet broadcast is all ones. And it's exactly the same down here, remember. So I'm going to actually copy and paste this entire area. Great. So now we just need to go binary to decimal. So this is 0. This is a 1. This is going to be 2 plus 4 plus 8, so that's going to be 14. This is 8 plus 4 plus 2 plus 1, so that's going to be 15. Down here, 4 ones. Remember that is 240. 4 ones, that's 240 basically, plus 1. So that's easy. This one here is all ones except for the last one. So that's 255 minus 1, remember? So 254. This one here all turned on, so that's going to be 255. Awesome. We have all of the decimal done. And remember, we need to look at how many host bits. So we have 4 host bits. So we'll be looking at 2 to the power 4 minus 2 equals, the 2 to the power 4 is 16 minus 2. That gives us 14 hosts per subnet. Great, so just a reminder, this was Worksheet C, and that completes what's called Lab 11A for your CIS 230 Cisco networking course. So, and if anybody else from the internets enjoyed this, I'm glad you found the video and hope it is useful in your beginning stages of subnetting. I'm likely going to have a part 2 video of this, and we'll go over some more worksheets, one of them being a slightly different method. So look out for that. Thanks a lot for watching.